All right. So, welcome everybody to another PWA Studio Community Update. We didn't have one last week because of an internal all hands, so we're kind of picking up after the last 2 weeks. I think in terms of the first agenda item demos, I believe Eric reached out to Adrian. Adrian, you had a great launch this week with the Inshu PWA, or I almost said PWAC, Inshu PWA, right? And so I think we reached out in terms of getting a demo from you and just open conversation questions about your work there, which is outstanding. So if you want to kick us off, that would be great.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me this week. I'm happy to share the work we've done so far. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if it's on.
We see it. There it is.
Some of you or most of you have played around with the demo, I believe. So the story starts in September when I initially started off this project with support from Inshu, of course. And up to a month ago, I was the only developer on this project. And since February, another developer joined. His name is Igor. He helped me a lot to put this demo up on a server and make it go live. You should expect some cool contributions from him too in the future, both
Awesome.
in Inshu demo and hopefully in Venya if it applies. To start things off, as you can see, it's very different from Venya. The general idea was to develop the PWA version of Magento theme with UX and front-end patterns that we found to be really good throughout our experience with working on other projects with clients. So you can see that initially it's responsive. It has both mobile and desktop. So I'm going to keep it mobile for a while during this demo. So as you can see, this is a category page. It's pretty much standard with as with Venya. The only noticeable differences are the grid and list switcher, which was pretty straightforward, and the item count changer. So that was a nice addition. Also, there are dynamic breadcrumbs. So we navigate to another category, you should see the breadcrumbs changing. So on product page, I made a few design decisions which are different from Venya. For example, configurable options are all in dropdowns. I made this decision because swatches don't have the full API support, I believe. For example, for colors, you can only get the title or the label. You cannot get the value for the color or the swatch image. Let me know if I'm wrong, but at the time, the best decision for us was to go with simple dropdowns.
Yep.
Of course, we have the add to cart and quantity changers. We also have the share buttons, which are working, and we have a working gallery and a simple product description. So I'm adding it to the cart. And another change from Venya is that we have cart and checkout pages, which are more similar to the standard Magento 1 and Magento 2 page structure. So for now, a shopping cart only has an option to remove the product and continue to checkout. We are going to add the edit cart functionality here in about a week or so. So moving on to the checkout, this is one of the biggest differences uh, uh, in terms of UX. It has more standard Magento structure. The steps, as you can see, we have skipped the step. Here we can have the standard payment methods. Selecting the shipping method, and in the end you get the little overview and you're placing order. Hopefully it will go through, and that's it. You can create the account, which is same as on Venya. So that is it. It has been really fun working on this project. I really like the tooling and how easy it was to make. So I'm really happy with the freedom and customizations that we can make in terms of choosing our libraries and JavaScript packages. For example, Venya is using informed package for forms. We are using React final form for our forms, and we have different front-end tooling. We are using more post-CSS plugins like CSS Nano and CSS preset env for supporting modern CSS. So that's it for the demo. Let me know if you have any questions.
Awesome. Awesome, Adrian. Yeah, well, I think we'll open up to the floor here if there are any questions, comments. Anyone on the line?
I've got lots of questions, but I don't want to take control of the mic. So I think it's great work, though, Adrian. You guys have done a fantastic job. I know I've said to you guys quite a bit. You know, these are the type of outcomes that we're trying to drive, right? And you know, very much of what we're doing around Venya, the UI components. It's not just a new theme. It's not just Venya. It's really about the whole experience here. And so what you've done to kind of build off what we've created, extend where you think it makes sense. You know, pressure test the things that make that really are important to you, and you know, look at, you know, kind of incremental contribution as part of that. That's exactly what we want. So I think this is a great example of that, and you know, we're anxious to see the continued development between yourself and Igor along the way for that. So nice work. I mean, you know that we certainly talk about that quite a bit, but this is a great example of how that can work.
Thank you. I wanted to show one more little thing. It's not really PWA Studio related, but also cool thing that we also wanted to make sure that it's great. It's the CSS itself. So we are using, as I've said, modern CSS approach with CSS variables and calculation functions. For example, we have typography variables. Coding. So let me just find the, okay. So it's really easy to customize everything and it doesn't break. So for example, if I were to choose the, oh, why did it break? Okay. It's really easy to change the variables and get the changes you want. For example, let's change this to different color. And we can see on the category page that all buttons have changed color. I mean, it's basic CSS, but in terms of structure, we have really paid attention to making the scopes of CSS really nice in order to make quick customizations on future projects. For example, CTA buttons would have a different color. So, yeah. Any questions?
This is James. Like Eric, I don't want to talk for too long because I've done that enough, but wanted to add to his congratulations and just express my excitement about how great it is to see you building on PWA Studio and showing some of the potential, even as you had to do extra work to fork it, because we still have a lot more to do for scaffolding new projects. But you've contributed a tremendous amount, and I appreciate it. But I did have a question, which was, you're demonstrating changing the CSS variables using the Chrome inspector. So that hot
Yes.
updates entirely within Chrome. And of course, that's all you can do when you're showing off the production site.
Yes.
But I'm wondering if you had a good experience with the hot reloading system during development.
In terms of CSS, yeah. So whenever I made small incremental changes to CSS, it updated really fast, and I was really happy about it. But once I added the composing classes, which is CSS modules feature, I think, it started the whole page reload, but it wasn't that big of an issue. So if it
Interesting.
if it's possible for code composing to not trigger the whole reload, because I know it needs the Webpack needs to add the whole class to the component, so maybe that's why it refreshes the whole page, but that's not really too big of an issue.
Still, thank you for the feedback. It is true that once the CSS modules have to recompose classes, then they often require a full reload. It's something that you can fix with good hot module reloading, but right now we haven't. And that's a point for improvement. And I guess I have one other question, which is, you have created a lot more CSS variables, and it looks like you've used BEM to define them.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that choice, how it applies to CSS variables, and what advantages that has given you?
The main advantage that I've noticed is that I'm much better at memorizing the variables, because I just go typography, something something, color something something, vertical spacing, horizontal spacing, and
Yeah.
it really just gives me a pattern that is easy to memorize, and I really don't have to go back and check if the editor doesn't auto-complete it or auto-suggest it for me. So,
Yeah, it would be super great if we supported CSS variables in the global scope as auto-completable things in editors.
yeah.
But anyway, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go on, please.
But I also wanted to keep the naming consistent between the classes, CSS classes, and variables. So you can see that we have the object-oriented CSS and BEM combination. Like here, you can see header, header with border, header default, etc.
Gotcha. The CSS variables using the BEM syntax is something I need to get my mind around, because BEM is for indicating a particular element, and the variables are supposed to apply to many. So I'm just trying to figure that out in my head.
Yeah, I've actually wrote an article a while ago on how to name CMS blocks in Magento 1 and Magento 2 in order to remember them easy. And I used a similar syntax to BEM. And since then, I've tried to apply it in as many cases as possible, because I found out it's really easy to memorize and navigate between the code.
So one takeaway we have from this is that you have found that the BEM naming convention works for any hierarchical system, not just CSS classes per element. That's really interesting.
Exactly.
Interesting. Thank you. That's all I got. But once again, so proud of it, and thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any last questions, comments for Adrian? Perfect. Okay, so next, I believe that we have Mr. Kalkaban on the line. James has worked over the last week to do some discovery around our dev docs and work to determine maybe some gaps or some opportunities for future dev doc development. I believe in his ticket, which is on our board, that contained that discovery effort. There were some proposals that he wanted to cover with the team, with the community, and receive some feedback on. So if you're on the line, James, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. So this is the issue that Andrew was talking about that I'd like to highlight. Basically, I've proposed some topics and tutorials based on conversations we've seen in the community Slack channel. A lot of this shouldn't surprise you. It's how to do stuff and how to deploy to production. And what I wanted to do is open it up to the community for feedback. This will give you a chance to kind of shape the sort of roadmap for docs on what you want to see us create. We've got some feedback already, but I'd appreciate additional feedback. So I'll leave this issue open until maybe next week, and then I'll start turning these into issues that I can start working on. That was it for my update.
So, James, if you scroll down, Brendan, I think has left some feedback on that. He has some requests on the types of topics, I guess, that he would like to see. So just have a look at that when you're making changes.
Yeah. I noticed his comment yesterday. I'll definitely factor that in when I'm creating these issues.
Awesome, thank you.
I mean, we also have some time right now. So if anybody on the line, I think it would be a great discussion for a few minutes to say if there's anybody on the line that can think off the top of their head about something in DevDocs that you wish was there or that is applicable to this topic, right? We're welcome to that feedback right now. Totally engaged group today.
We have a shy group.
I actually wanted to ask, it would be nice in docs to have, I remember that the how to create your own PWA Studio project from scratch. I have used that guide when I started with my project with Intro demo, but I checked a few days ago and it wasn't there, I believe.
Yeah, we decided to remove that topic because people were getting confused, and it was an out-of-date topic anyways.
Okay.
But we are, I have it in my doc plan about starting a project from scratch using an Upward server and all that. That is in the plan. We'll see what that looks like as I take a look and groom it some more.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, so we'll move on. I guess is there again open floor for anyone on the call? Is there any are there any open questions? Anything that anyone has seen over the last couple of weeks, either in the community Slack channel or on our board that they have questions about or would like a demo for, or anybody on the team that wants to demo something? All right, so
Yeah, Eric, you know
sorry.
me. I'd like to see it demoed against our cloud.
Everything you see is a demo against our cloud, except that the Pro instance implementation, which includes the Upward PHP demo, is still not publicly available for scaling reasons, and that's very important to us. But yeah, I mean, bear in mind the cloud deployments of Magento, PWA Studio, and Venia are currently demonstrating beautifully the fact that the front end in Node.js can be deployed entirely separately from the backing Magento instance. That's how it all works today. And we're looking forward to also having a demo alongside it of deploying them all in the same doc root under a single PHP server. So yeah,
So then,
we're
James,
looking forward to demoing
why
it.
then when I spin one up and Jeff Fritz spins one up, when we try to run it, we can't get him to run. It won't even do simple queries.
We have a lot of additional documentation and use case analysis to do. So I'm sorry that you guys are having trouble. But we can take it offline, first of all, but I think the main thing to understand is that the version relationships between the develop branch of Magento, the release branch of Magento, and the current branch of PWA Studio are still under kind of some clarification work. And our core team is actually among the work in progress right now is a story clarifying that and adding tooling to that. So that may help to clarify things. And then there's some additional configuration work that we can talk about. And then once we've got it figured, then we will put it in docs.
Okay, so yeah, if we could take it offline and send an email every day this week, try to figure out how we get an answer to that so that we can use it when we're out there selling things to people.
Gotcha.
And when
Yeah.
we're trying to wire AEMs to it, so we can demo that since it's a foundation to AEM, right? All the rest of the things that Graph needs to support as well. Now I know this is a PWA meeting, but Graph is kind of the foundation of PWA. That's what's driving Graph, and how do we make sure all the things that we're seeing and doing here can be immediately leveraged by people that are out there selling it and using the cloud to sell.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's really important to note the PWA aspects of what we're using here versus GraphQL and kind of on its own track. So yeah, Dave, let's talk about that offline. The GraphQL team actually has their own forum very similar to this to kind of talk through things, and I think we're overdue for some enablement with some of the upcoming 2.3.1 work. Just as a side note, if you were to look at the board today, there's a lot of great work really as we bear down on 2.3.1, which is coming out in the next couple of weeks. And so for those who are following, for us, we'll get better, faster, and 2.3.1 brings a lot of great enablement around and really coverage around GraphQL, including the introspection fix that we're pretty excited about. And so it won't be any changes on the front end of the demos, but if you're following along, you'll see more GraphQL here in the next couple of weeks. And so you've got folks on the call here like Tommy and others who are looking at that with great detail and making sure that we're all set for that changeover in a few weeks. So. But yeah, Dave, let's take that offline. I think your needs are they're related, but they're fairly unique too, and so we want to make sure those are covered.
Yeah, and it's a double down, guys. And again, don't ever get me wrong that I'm not excited about PWA. I am. I think it's really, really cool, right? And it's just, so how do this team can all show it. How do we get all of Aaron Crass's team to be able to show it, Mark Weissler's team to be able to show it, get everybody excited about being able to very, very easily take all this fantastic work that you guys are doing and get that in front of customers that are in front of revenue streams, right?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Sorry if this is the wrong place. You and James tell me, and we'll take it completely sideways, and you'll never hear it again on this call.
All right.
Yep.
Thanks, David. So as Eric kind of teed up there, the team has been working pretty diligently over the last couple of weeks on 2.3.1 compatibility, and in that regard, I was hoping to turn it over to Mr. Zetland for a quick update on anything relevant for the community on what we've been working on over the last couple of weeks since our last community sync.
Sure. I've had my video turned off just for performance reasons, but I can speak briefly to it. I don't need to share my screen because what's on here is probably the important part. Andrew, do you want to filter it for our internal status? There's no secrets here about it. So we right now are working towards a compatibility release for the upcoming Magento 2.3.1 release. You may have seen that I tweeted recently what is the way that we should treat a GraphQL schema. Should we treat it as data particular to a Magento instance that needs to be configured around, or should we treat it as code, which is particular to the Magento version and needs to have a hard semantic versioning relationship? And 75% of you guys, I don't know about this call, but 75% of the respondents said that it's code, and they are all wrong, and I'm going to change everyone's mind. We talked about making sure that we're going to do responsible semantic versioning for PWA Studio, and we are still committed to that. But one thing that we have come to understand is that GraphQL breaking changes are something that can happen because of a Magento update. Also, they can happen because of a change in your custom attribute set or a schema change brought on by the installation of an extension. And because those things are particular to Magento instances, then we have to consider them as part of instance configuration, which is a type of data. And so making a breaking change for any GraphQL schema change would be one consistent way of doing it, but there's no way to, because those aren't related to versions. So instead, we have to find another consistent way of doing it. And that means that we can't break versions for schema changes from the outside. So we're not going to break versions for schema changes from the inside either. What we're going to do instead is add tooling to help you intake changes from the Magento backing instances schema. And what that is, what the backlog shows you as part of that effort is that we are creating some additional tooling, which you may have already experienced some of in the validation of queries step during the build of PWA Studio today. Our core team is working on adding some intelligence to that, which can identify for you what likely Magento configuration changes have resulted in a breaking GraphQL change to the schema. It's also going to log extensive and helpful messages about which files have breaking changes that are necessary. And we are going to have an internal log, which the tooling will use to help you understand what's likeliest, if it's a breaking change to the Magento version or an incompatibility there, or an issue with your store's configuration. So right now we have a story in progress for that tooling work, and additionally, we have a story in progress to refactor some of the Venia queries so they're no longer tied to Venia sample data. If you have right now tried to get a store running without installing specifically the Venia custom attributes, and you have seen that product pages fail to load because of a GraphQL type error, then you're not alone. We've all seen that, and that's because the GraphQL queries for the product page initially relied on Venia sample data specific store configuration. That's a bug for us. We need to treat Venia a little like the existing stack treats Luma, where it is an opinionated, styled store, yet it is also meant for wide consumption in a large number of configurations. So we need to write the code to be as generic as possible. So we're making that change. And lastly, we want it to be possible for you to consume individual Venia components. You want to import the product detail page. You want to import just the search bar. You should be able to do that and not only import just the presentational component itself, but also the container component, which is connected directly to the Venia drivers. You should be able to reuse queries as encapsulated parts of components. But if those queries are dependent on the Magento version or on the backing instance, then we want to make sure that there is some backwards compatibility layer installed. Now that layer could easily add some abstraction like an ORM that would add complexity to the concepts in PWA Studio. We don't want to do that. We want the mappers to be very simple and very functional. So we're working on an interface and a standard for adding mapping functionality to a component so that it can be compatible with more than one version of the GraphQL schema. So with those three efforts, the tooling to intake schema changes, the genericizing of the Venia components, and the addition of a mapping layer for the JavaScript components themselves and the data they consume, we plan to release with 2.3.1 not just the 2.3.1 compatible version of PWA Studio, but a version of PWA Studio that is a minor release that adds compatibility systems for all future GraphQL schema changes. And we, of course, accept and would welcome and appreciate any more contribution you have on ideas for tooling or on problems you confront with breaking changes to the GraphQL schema or questions you have about that roadmap. So you can see in the in progress that we have an epic for that, and we have those stories that I just laid out, those three. That's all I got to say, and we're open for questions.
Thanks, James. Any questions on 2.3.1 compatibility and the topic that James just covered? All right. So I would say then overall to kind of wrap up today's call, if you take a look at our board, anybody that has been a part of this project, has been contributing to the project over the last few months, will probably notice that our board has had some, we talked about closer to the holidays, we talked about how the team was transitioning to Kanban process rather than Scrum. Because of that, we've also had some transformation of our board and our workflows. The team has worked really, really hard over the last few weeks to make sure that we got control over our work in progress. Started working our way through all of our tickets on our board, which at the time when we started this process was something like 60 issues that were in progress. We can see now that from ready to start to review in QA, right, there's, 19 issues. So great progress by the team. And I think the importance of that is that it gives us the capacity to ingest more of the great contribution that we're getting from community members. I would say that here that we're looking to reintroduce, I think, some of the process that used to exist when we were in Scrum in terms of the community grooming or community tickets that we identify as what was the tag that we used to use?
Oh, help wanted.
Help wanted.
Good first issue.
Help wanted. So we'll look to in the next couple of weeks start bringing that back so we can, if you're a community member that's looking for how do I contribute to this project or where can I contribute, and I would say first off we welcome all contribution, and then next, right, like anything right now that isn't ready to start is of course up for, I think, anybody to pick up and help with. And then lastly, we'll look at how we start reintroducing the help wanted label to make sure it's obvious if you're a community member looking to contribute where you can do that. In progress, evolution, we're improving our internal process, and I think overall it's going to be really beneficial for everyone involved with the project. Any questions there? Any comments from the group?
All good.
All good. All right. So I think that wraps up our call for today with 7 minutes back. Of course, if there are any questions on what we've covered today, we'll have the recording up on the YouTube Community Engineering channel today, and then you can, of course, ask us or engage with us in the community Slack channel. Perfect. Thanks, everyone.